Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker. Our first speaker is going to give us a more global European look. Maurizio Maggiore, I hope I pronounced your surname correctly. Please correct me if I'm wrong. He's from European Commission, from Directorate General for Research and Innovation. And he's going to be talking and speaking today about Green Deal implementation guide for road transport, a research and innovation perspective. So to give kind of European look on the matter. So Maurizio, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm putting myself on. Yes, I thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to give a kind of a panoramic view of the impact of the Green Deal on well, everybody, I think, and what we are doing from the research point of view. So I start sharing my presentation. Oops. Okay, so first thing is, of course, the Green Deal. That's the root of the changes in our. It's not advancing. Why? Okay. Yeah, it's the root of all the changes we expect in transport, but not only. So we have a climate environment to take care of. Of course, this means strong impact on sustainable transport, but also greener industry. In some cases, the ones that are supporting this switch in transport, for instance, batteries. The elimination of pollution, this is new because up to now, the things were quite separate. Now the idea is to try to address both at the same time with no compromises or as little as possible. The vision is that overall Europe becomes carbon neutral, and this means that transport basically must decrease by 90% by 2050, with an intermediate target of 55%. That's why we have a package called Fit for 55, which is updating all legislation that can have an impact on this. In transport, sustainable mobility means multimodality, using the digital technology to automate and connect this multimodal mobility. We are trying to put the real cost of the environmental impact into the prices, and try to make it faster to move to clean vehicles and alternative fuels. In some cases with that, trying to also contain the impact of the cost, in the sense that electricity normally, given the high efficiency of electric vehicle, should reduce the cost for the people of transport. Of course, there are also other sectors. So aviation and maritime also need to do a big effort. And in the environment of the Baltic, I think there are a lot of chances, for instance, for short shipping to move to zero emission. We are revising, as I said, all legislation. Just to make an example, CO2 emission performance standards will be made tighter. Air pollution, the Clean Vehicle Directive, which is basically procurement from public authorities of zero emission vehicles. Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive, which is supporting the deployment by providing the recharging and refueling infrastructure adapted for electric and hydrogen. The TEN-T regulation, which is the one basically deciding how to develop the road infrastructure, the rail and the other ones, including, for instance, for short sea shipping, and so on. So there's many more actions, all trying to align the legislation to the, let's say, the decarbonization targets, the climate targets. The Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Directive is aiming at facilitating the ship by ensuring interoperability. There are still issues, for instance, with the payment, many different systems and so on, trying to make it easier and transparent for the customer. And in perspective, to handle the increase in user demand, we expect a large uptake. In the last 2 years, this has been becoming apparent in some countries, up to 20%, and Norway 70% of new sales are electric. So people expect to have the infrastructure developing as fast. Looking also at heavy-duty vehicles, which at the moment are at an earlier stage of development, but also thinking of what it means to have trucks with megawatt level batteries on the road and the need for charging them. So, and also in this case, low and zero emission shipping and aviation, for instance, having shoreside electricity supply for charging or for reducing the emissions when the ships are in port, just to make an example. From the point of view of the Zero Pollution Action Plan, which has just been published, of course, a lot of actions will be done to try and turn the pyramid upside down. So instead of trying to remediation at the end, to try and do as much as possible to prevent pollution. So zero emission, for instance, transport would do a lot on this. Moving to the research side of this, what are we doing to support these ambitious objectives? This is the structure of the work program that we are working on. It should be published shortly. As you see, there is a specific area to batteries, because we recognize that batteries are at the heart of a lot of different applications, which all are related to reduction of emissions. And in destination 5 and 6, we have the specific transport part. In particular for road, we have a zero emission specific approach. So there will be no more research on any combustion engine there. Also because an investment done today will probably not be paying off by the time that these vehicles would more or less get out of the market. So, but also because we want to basically put all the effort into the development and reduction of cost for the customer of these vehicles. At the same time, we have a specific area on health and environmental issues, which is separate, and also there we are looking at several types of emission. And as you see, you have other areas for aviation and waterborne transport, but I will mostly deal with road because that's my area. Then here there is, for instance, the part on connected and automated mobility. And we have a separate area for hydrogen and fuel cells, which is in a separate joint initiative, and therefore is not in this picture. Just to have an idea, in the first work program, we have worked with in cooperation, in a co-creation mode. So the work program has been really discussed deeply, both inside the Commission and outside with the stakeholders and with the member states. The work program is trying to have as much impact as possible on the chosen sectors, and in particular on environment. And the idea is to look in a very comprehensive way, so on the vehicles, but also, for instance, on issues which are not so evident up to now, like non-tailpipe emission, in particular brakes. We will have a focus on larger projects than in the past in this area. The small projects, for instance, for SMEs and so on, remain, but in areas which are thematic, this is the trend. We have basically developed the 2.0 partnership, which is the follow-up of the Green Cars and then Green Vehicles initiative. And as you can see, the content has widened and widened across the various mutations. And in this one, basically, we have a system approach looking at the global transport and interfaces with the energy system. So there is, for instance, a bigger stress on the charging infrastructure, to support the AFID and so on. And also we will be giving a stronger weight to the heavy duty part, because up to now in the previous, for instance, green vehicles, we were looking maybe at buses in terms of heavy duty, but there was very little for heavy trucks and so on. So this will be much more evident in the future, particularly in the early calls. The areas that we will cover are basically vehicle technologies, integration of the vehicle in the energy system and the charging infrastructure. We'll look at mobility and of people and goods, looking at the whole chain and therefore logistics, for instance, with zero emission vehicles, which, as I said, since the trucks are starting to be available lately, I think there's very little experience on how to integrate zero emission vehicles into the logistics chain. And then we will also look at the global impact, not only in the vehicle, but also upstream. So the choices that can reduce the global impact in terms of climate, also of the manufacturing and the dismantling and so on. This picture is trying to put the focus on where we are working on. So battery electric vehicles is basically across all types of vehicles, because they, in some cases in this area, they are already there, and here we want them to develop. While fuel cell, the integration of the fuel cell into the vehicle, the development of the fuel cell and the tanks and the refueling will be in the specific joint initiative that I mentioned. The integration in the vehicle for this kind of heavy vehicles will be in our initiative. This is the short-term view and interfaces, because, as I said, there is a need for a strong cooperation with all the other approaches. So I just mentioned the hydrogen one. The same, of course, will happen with the battery initiative, where we have to exchange between the vehicle, let's say, perspective and the detailed electrochemical perspective, which will be developed in the batteries, but also the requirements of fast charging, of safety, and so on. They need to interact strongly. And also with the digital technologies and the automated vehicle, there might be synergies. For instance, when you think about automated taxis, so you have to design the vehicle, but knowing that it will be automatic, that could mean the vehicle is different. So there will be a lot of need for interaction. Just to give you an idea, the work program is not yet public, but just to give you an idea what is the first 2 years, we will have a strong focus on medium and long-range heavy-duty vehicles. We will look at the recharging infrastructure and how integrating that with the grid, because, as I say, we will have to prepare for millions of vehicles on our streets and charging more or less at the same time, so we have to manage that. We will look at specific component level technologies, so mainly power electronics and electric motors to make them more efficient and trying to reduce the use of rare materials. And as I mentioned, the life cycle assessment, trying to get, there's a first project to try and have a joint approach between To0 and the battery initiative, to try and have a holistic and integrated approach so that we have comparable results. Up to now, there's a lot of LCAs, but in many cases, the assumptions are different, and therefore it's difficult to compare between them. A quick look at the other initiatives. There is this Connected Cooperative and Automated Mobility Partnership for about $500 million contribution that will look at all the aspects of these automated vehicles. So European demonstration, vehicle technologies in the detail of the components and integration, tools for the safety validation, because of course, for people to accept this technology, you need to have a robust demonstration of this safety. And all these enabling technologies, for instance, like cybersecurity, that's becoming more and more a problem. We have seen what happened in the US, for instance, with the pipelines. The same type of approach could be applied to a network of vehicles and so on. I saw a message about the video. I don't know if I'm still on or not.
Yes, everything is working.
Okay, fine. Then, as I mentioned, there is the battery partnership, where we try to establish a European value chain. We have manufacturing in Europe, but mostly by foreign investors. We want to try to kickstart also European manufacturing and European technology. So we will have something like, well, short of $1 billion on that. In the first calls, this is the areas that we will try to cover.
Thank you, Maurizio. So thank you very much for your presentation. I think you gave a good overview of European plans here. And I would like to start with the question that is kind of more on a global scale. So, of course, these are very ambitious targets that European Commission has put forward, and many people in EU are definitely skeptical of whether we can achieve these goals or not. And this really takes a lot of effort and a lot of programs that you mentioned. So my question would be, what universities, researchers here also in the Baltic area, and also different stakeholders as municipalities can actually do to help European to achieve these European targets? And second question would be, how European Commission can help us to do this besides the project calls that have been put forward? Are there any other tools that we can approach European Commission to kind of help to push this agenda forward?
Well, on the first question, I think that the best universities can do is to prepare the people, because if you look at the vast amount of new technologies, or relatively new technology, I mean, electric vehicles are not brand new, but it's basically something like 10 years that we are working seriously on bringing them to market. So I think that the first thing we need is a sufficient amount of people, because the industry at the moment has a problem that they have a lot of experts in mechanical and combustion and so on and so forth, but not enough for software. For instance, you see a lot of issues with software and with electronic design. So that's, I think, it's a very important part. At the same time, in doing that, I think you might form the type of people that are less skeptical, because they have hands-on. A lot of skepticism is coming from people that have worked on combustion and they only see that. So of course they don't share, let's say, the vision. But at the same time, we know, we have examples. I mean, Norway is selling 70%. And all these problems that people mention for being skeptical, you know, cold climate, range, and whatever. I mean, Norway is thousands of kilometers long. There's a very cold climate, and everybody seems to be happy with driving electric vehicles, for instance. So sometimes you need a fresh look. In terms of programs, I think that there are adjustments funds in some areas, so that could be another way. Also because, of course, we cannot only talk about the vehicles. You need the electricity, and the electricity must also be clean. Otherwise, I think we still gain something, for instance, on pollution. But of course, the maximum gain, the total decarbonization, only happens when we have both decarbonized. Of course, we have to start now, and in parallel also clean the electricity. And I would say that in your region, I think it's important also to look at shipping, because there's a tight network of relatively short range shipping lines. And there, the decarbonization is a real possibility, as the Danish and the Norwegian are showing. So, you know, in terms of smart specialization, that could be an area where there could be an interest, because you have a geographical situation which, of course, is particularly favorable to that.
Yes, we have two more questions, and I will try to be brief with them. So first one is regarding, you mentioned that there's not going to be any more support for combustion engines. And the question is, that this also include research on combustion engines designed for biofuels and renewable fuels, and why the reasoning? So that would be...
Yeah, well, first of all, this is true for road. In aircraft, for instance, there is still. The logic is that as I mentioned, the investments, if we really want to have an impact, has to be on the fuel side. Talking to the experts, you know, they say, yeah, we could gain a few percent with optimization of the engine, but is that cost effective? I think we have a big investment in the fuels, in making the fuels available. I'm not talking about that because I'm transport, but the energy colleagues have hundreds of millions on alternative ways of doing decarbonized fuels. Now, if you have those fuels, the best way is to just put them into a blend and decarbonize partly the existing vehicles and the existing technologies. Now, for ships and aircraft, it's similar, and it's just, well, I don't know why it's... it's similar, and also there we see a longer time for the return on the investment, because basically those technologies will probably stay for longer, while on cars we see automotive manufacturers already saying we stop, or we will stop soon to invest in new technologies. So spending money on research today for something that then in 10 years Volvo says that they will no longer have anything. Bentley, several companies have announced that. It doesn't seem let's say a viable option in order to have a return, because remember, we do research, then after 5-8 years it could go to the market, and then they do new technologies that last on the market 10 years or 5 years. I think that it's difficult to see an investor putting money on something which has such a short return.
Thank you. I think we will move, because of the time, we'll move on, and let's save the rest of the questions for our panel discussion. Thank you very much, Maurizio. As you mentioned, recharging of electrical vehicles is very important, a crucial part of it, and therefore we have our next speaker,